Let's talk about the timeline for giving the aid. Let me put this up. The aid was held up all summer, and it was finally released on September 11th, a month and a half ago. Here's the timing. 2 days before, the Inspector General informed the House Intelligence Committee about the whistleblower complaint. Kellyanne, the president didn't release the aid until the story was out.
You're trying to make that causation where it may be
coincidence. I find it an awfully interesting coincidence.
Well, they've got their aid, and that's what's important. And why
no. But how the aid came out, it was held up all summer till the 11th of September, and the only reason it came out was because...
No, don't say that. Don't go there. You
had already...
You have no idea that's why it was held out.
So you think it's a coincidence that the whistleblower complaint comes on the 9th and the aid is released on the 11th? You're suggesting that's a coincidence?
Well, I'm suggesting that you don't know what you were just about to say to be true. That the only reason it came out was because 2 days before a whistleblower that Schiff's staff was nefariously colluding with. Adam Schiff was colluding with the whistleblower, apparently.
Let's just say that President Trump did condition giving the military aid, withheld it, and said it will be given out only if you investigate Joe Biden.
I haven't seen it anywhere.
Is that an impeachable offense?
You're giving me is it a high crime and misdemeanor? I wouldn't think so. But you're giving me a hypothetical. In other words, you're giving me a hypothetical.
I'm just saying, I think it's a clarifying question. If all of it is true, are you saying that it's impeachable or not?
Let's have these hearings. We're going to remove a president of the United States based on the fact that a couple of news outlets insisted, they still have their jobs, unfortunately, insisted that there were 8 quid pro quos in here, that he asked to investigate Biden as his political rival. I don't see anything in this transcript, maybe you can circle it for me, about 2020, about Biden as his political rival, about holding up aid, about quid pro quo.
This is Kellyanne Conway admitting that even if she were to concede that Trump did a quid pro quo, which I should note, he did, that even that wouldn't be impeachable. In other words, we went from it was a perfect call to he may have been improper, but that's just Trump being Trump, to okay, he asked for a favor, but he didn't say anything about withholding aid, so there's no quid pro quo, to so what if there was a quid pro quo, it's not a high crime or misdemeanor. If the goalposts were moved any farther, they would be in the parking lot. Kellyanne goes on to pretend that even so, the whole notion of a quid pro quo was merely hypothetical. She pretends that she can't even find the mention of anything remotely related to a quid pro quo, even asking Chris Wallace to circle it. Only she's playing dumb and pretending that because Trump didn't say outright, let's do a quid pro quo, that he's completely absolved of any wrongdoing. But the actual facts surrounding this say otherwise. The fact is that Trump did withhold the aid, and Chris Wallace lays out the timeline that military aid, which was legally allocated by Congress, was supposed to be delivered to Ukraine in February. It wasn't, and it still wasn't even after the July 25th call between Trump and Zelensky, the call during which Bill Taylor, the administration's top Ukraine diplomat, testified that Trump wanted a public announcement of a probe into Biden. In fact, the only reason it was ever released was because the Inspector General delivered the whistleblower complaint to the House Intel Committee, which was reported by the New York Times and the Washington Post. And then suddenly, after months and months and months of withholding that aid, within 48 hours it was released. So Kellyanne can clutch her pearls at the very notion that this is anything beyond a coincidence, but she's fooling literally no one. Another fact here is that even the summary of the call released by the White House proves that Trump asked Zelensky for the favor of investigating Joe Biden. And I know Kellyanne was looking for someone to circle it for her, so I went ahead and did just that, just in case she wasn't able to find it. So to put the very simple pieces of this puzzle together, we know that Trump did indeed withhold military aid, that he wanted the favor of an investigation into Joe Biden, and that, as Bill Taylor testified, Trump wouldn't release the aid until he got the promise of a public announcement of an investigation into Biden. So Kellyanne can pretend that no matter how hard she tries, she just doesn't see it. But I will only do this thing for you when you've done something for me is the literal definition of a quid pro quo. But even humoring Conway's arguments is a fool's errand, since she's clearly acting in bad faith. Because while she's pretending poorly that there's no quid pro quo, she also admitted in the same interview that it's not even impeachable. In other words, she's just lining up whatever defenses she can cling on to. But the most important thing for this administration is that they have some defense to desperately shout from the South Lawn of the White House, and for Hannity and Tucker Carlson and Judge Jeanine to feed to the 30% of Americans who think that the news they deliver is even remotely real. But if Trump had any actual facts on his side, he wouldn't need to dispatch Kellyanne Conway to pretend that the quid pro quo that we all know occurred didn't. To pretend that a deal wherein Trump tries to extort a foreign country with legally allocated military aid so he can get help in 2020 is somehow not impeachable. But the facts aren't on his side, so Kellyanne and her obfuscations are the best he's got, which really doesn't bode well for the White House.